Good morning, everybody. Tom Kaczynski here. It's almost 5 in the morning. I had some work I got to do early this morning, so off to an early start. And I won't lie, much like I did a lot of times during Coronavirus Central, I'm hiding in the bathroom. It's easy to keep a warm room in the house, and if you find this is a pro tip as someone who's had to figure these things out. You want to save some energy in your electric bill in any given year. What you can do is you can choose to heat the places where there's plumbing and things that could go out and not heat other places. So the bathroom's always warm because there's a lot of pipes, right? Because who wants to have their shower burst out at them or have frozen situation? But it's not too bad here. We're making it through. Anyway, I want to thank everyone who's here listening. And today's going to be a little bit of a different show. Just going to share some thoughts. Not going to try to do anything deep, but you guys like to listen to me ramble. You find it comfortable. And I would just say, with some respect to everyone there, if I ever say anything that offends anyone, I'm not really trying to. I read a lot, and I'm terrible about attribution. But just to put it out there, because someone had asked, because I was talking about some sensitive issues with women and, their experiences with sexual assault, I'm not approving of it. I'm just simply saying, and I will share the source because I did look at it. There was a number of posts coming off of different Reddit groups where they had posted surveys from various women's magazines, and these were intimate questions asking how women responded to it, and they were dealing with the shame of the fact that they enjoyed something they were taught not to when men assaulted them, and it doesn't make it right. Their head was at odds with their body, and that was kind of the point I wanted to get to. That we often find that what our bodies want is different than what we want. Like what I want is to weigh $180. What my body wants is to eat something that has sugar in it because sugar is more addictive than crack cocaine, and it absolutely is. And yet we sell it to kids, knowing it causes diabetes like crazy. One more point of the nutritional medical complex, right? But my goal isn't to get into all that today, and I know I'm at a little bit of an odd angle here because, like I said, I'm hanging out in the warm room in the house. The wife's asleep. It's very early, and I don't want to wake her. I wanted to talk about just where I'm going to be doing in the future. So a little bit of thought, and I haven't made up my mind. I can change my mind 100 times, and you all know I will. But I spent the last 10 years, let's say, maybe even more than that, trying to be a social animal in a lot of ways, helping people, educating people, trying to find system-based solutions. And I think you can sense with the weariness in my voice that I'm past that point in life, and I'm okay with it. I've made my peace with that. That's not bad. Where am I going now? I miss writing. I miss it terribly, but to write takes time and energy and focus that can't be here. Right now, the focus is on all the horrible logistical bits of trying to reset your life into a new culture, and trying to plan for that. And once that happens, the days of me being a social political commentator may very quickly come to an end. It's just, and the reason is simple enough because there's really not much you can do about it. But it's not that I've given up on big ideas. I've actually learned to look inside for bigger questions. And when you look inside, you're looking for your heart, you're looking for your soul, you're looking for the Holy Spirit within you and trying to find a way to keep that alive in a time that's a challenge to it. And that's a challenge that each of us has to take on, to be more than an animal, like we talked about in the last episode, to be a man, to find the spirit and kindle it within. And, from talking to some friends who I've been close to for years, thinking about it, I will probably get back to writing fiction. I may write some archaeology, some history stuff, and I'm not saying I'm never going to write social commentary again. A few years down the line, I probably will write a summary of what I thought went wrong in America long after I have citizenship elsewhere and I can feel a little safer about doing it. Although it's hard these days, you say anything true, you're going to get shut down. And I think the shutdown censorship complex is going to be terrible this year. So instead of, running into the buzzsaw, I'm just going to keep it quiet. And what I think I want to do, and we'll go in a little bit personal direction with this, but just talk about from a faith perspective for a minute. I came to being a Christian late in the game. My parents were nominally Christian, but they didn't really practice. There were issues about my mother was my dad's second marriage. Don't want to get into all the details of that. My parents are both gone, but it left a bad taste in certain things. They came out of the Catholic tradition. Leave that alone for the moment. I don't want to piss you guys off more than usual by going into those fights. But suffice it to say, I didn't grow up in a particularly religious setting, and my parents kind of got run over by me because I can just do what I want. I'm inscrutable. I mean, my wife would tell you it's a nightmare, but it's the truth. So, but one of the things I've noticed is that, as Christians, there's not a lot of positive things to look forward to in terms of either how your eschatology works. In the short term, of course, the end is a very happy ending, but it's very hard when there's no steps in between to make one giant leap. But isn't that a leap of faith? The other part you notice is that the institutions just don't have a lot to offer. They close off the window and it's kind of dead in a lot of ways because they say, oh, well, things aren't happening a lot of times because we live in a world where I find that evil embraces the supernatural for the worst of causes and good avoids the supernatural because of fear of the mistakes they might make with it. And look, I get it. Being accountable for decisions you have to make is a hell of a thing to do. And I've been there enough times. And the truth is, you're going to mess up. I mean, I think a lot of people, and I say this in a loving way, I guess, who come out of the evangelical traditions, which I've kind of wandered into partially because that's where my wife came from, and I don't really fit there perfectly either. But one of the things that I observe is they try not to get themselves into trouble sometimes more than doing good. And not all of them, but enough. And I understand why that happens, or that you rest on the idea that you're doing good. And I've kind of realized none of us can do good. We just don't have the wisdom. We don't know how to do it. And that being the case, you're stuck being a sinner and you accept this gift of radical grace, right? And I've learned to do that because how am I to judge how evil or good or what the intentions are in a person's heart? Or, I got to pull those slings, I got to pull the mote out of my own eye, right? Before I begin judging people like that. And I can't do it. And I don't want to do it. Let God do that. I'm just going to forgive. And I forgive mainly because I don't want the burden on my soul of the problems I have with other people. And I'm trying because I've made mistakes in the past, like all of us, and having connections that were not rightly set up, that the expectations were wrong or things were given one way or another or work was done. And anything I do in that moment. I don't keep debts. I don't borrow money. I don't do things like that. I just won't do it. And there's a very good reason why I won't do it, because if you do it, you're going to get yourself in trouble whether you mean to or not. But back to Christianity and supernaturality. So kids have fun stuff to watch. They have magic shows. They have all these sort of things, all these powers that are hinted at. And the Bible hints at the same powers if you start to study them. If you really do. Look at the power the prophet Elijah had. Look at the power Moses had. Look at the power Christ had. And the things he overcame. I mean, even a cursory reading of the Gospels, he spends 40 days in the desert, tempted by devils. All these visions he sees. That's our legacy, and we've abandoned it for a set of rules because we're scared we're going to screw up. And like the parable of talents teaches, the Lord doesn't want you to be scared to screw up. He wants you to take what you have and invest in. And for me as a writer, I think what I want to do is begin telling the story of those supernatural, abilities that were gifted to us, that were the gifts of God. And for those of you who've read some of the Apocrypha, I think, give me a second, I want to sit up here. You may see the shower in the background. No big deal if you do. Just get comfy here. I think one of the things that you begin to realize when you're looking at these sort of things is we have been told we have a very limited capacity compared to what God teaches if you believe the Bible, or compared to what you can observe if you're really attentive and you're willing to kind of look between the cracks. So recovering that legacy is something that's very important to me, and finding a way to do so that I think is scripturally sound and that prevents people from getting into deeper trouble is an issue. And this is it, right? I mean, the problem is if you want to go help people where they are, you sometimes have to get to where they are, and then that means you have to get away from your safe space. You have to get away from where you feel comfortable and safe and you're with the Lord. And look, I've been in that spot before, and the Lord says, go do something. It's happened to me several times in my life, and I'm like, no, I don't want to. I don't like people. I don't like going out there. It's too risky. But you do it. And for me, what I've learned my gift is I can imagine worlds, and sometimes I can live in them a little bit, get myself onto a better timeline, maybe just a little bit, and try to share something beautiful and something wonderful, because I've shared too much ugliness. I see it. I know it. It's getting worse. It's only going to get worse. We live in a dark time. Anyone who's telling you otherwise is full of crap. And anyone who tells you, oh, it's going to get better right away, no, it isn't. It's going to get worse. It's going to get a lot worse. But there's an opportunity for you to build a bubble where you can do things differently. And the interesting thing in that, in the spiritual sense, is if you had a small community of people who kind of thought the right way, I would be fascinated to see what they could figure out if they had the time and space for prayer or cultivation of the self. But we can't, because we're constantly being forced to give our energy away, whether in drips or drabs, because this is what we owe. We owe a world where we accept the role of money, and that money defines ownership of land. If you think you can own land, wait till your property taxes come through. It's a very simple way of looking at things, but it is actually a pretty accurate one of the sort of problems that you will experience in life if you want to separate. But if you look past that, one of the things I enjoy, and I highly recommend to any Christian or non-Christian, is go read the first book of Enoch. You can read all three of them if you want, but in that book, which is a sort of amplified version of the story of the fall of the Watchers, the people basically who resulted from the mating of angels and the fallen angels, the Watchers, and the daughters of men, the women who slept with them. You start to find something a little different in the story. And what you find is that all these powers were theoretically given to mankind so that these fallen angels could advantage their descendants. I mean, what's more basic in nature? And yet, God gave them these powers, and God said explicitly, they call it the Ancient of Days, another name for the Almighty in ancient Hebrew traditions. What he basically said is, yeah, you have these powers, but I have even more powers I haven't given you. And there's no limit to God's powers, and that's the point. And God gave a lot of powers. God gave powers to man to speak things and make them true. God gave power to man to, call out falsehood. Look at Elijah again as an example, or Elisha. God gave us the ability to name things and give meaning and purpose to them. God gave us the ability to pray and to seek intercession or to cast out demons. I mean, all of these things are out there, and yet Christians run from them. And the reason why it's interesting is because the whole society, excuse me, is structured against the idea that there would be a supernatural force that would claim moral authority and therefore perhaps legal authority. Because what's the sanction for authority? Is it that you're doing good, or is it that you can exercise power? So they never let that happen. We are allowed to choose the thousand bads and not the one good, and so I kind of have this idea, much like happened in Pentecost, that eventually there may be an end times church that comes forward and speaks truth with such power, perhaps behind the two witnesses, that will be able to change the way people think, or at least some. And they're not scheduled to succeed. In the same way that, Jesus couldn't save Judas. Certain things have to play out certain ways for reasons beyond our understanding, and to accept that there are mysteries beyond our understanding. But once you begin accepting that there are mysteries beyond our understanding, you can explore them with a sense of fascination, right? Like a small child sees the world, and you begin recovering the supernatural. And it's a sad thing, and I'll just say it, you can only really understand the supernatural through either deep prayer and fasting, which is one way, and probably the better way to go about it, or by coming out of the counsels of the enemy, by knowing the sort of things that they do, that often they get these powers from beings, let's call them transdimensional, they're demons, but that's what they are, that will give certain authorities, and governments apparently, if you believe some of the stories going back to Roswell, to make those deals, or the Nazis in Vril, or the Soviets have it, different things, and there's things out there in the ether. Even you go back to Marconi, when he first went and put radio, what stunned him was there were voices in the night, things you couldn't see, and there's a world there that's waiting to be found that we've forgotten. And honestly, part of claiming our birthright means finding that, stepping out a little bit, looking around the third heaven, seeing not just what's here, but seeing how it connects to other pieces. And no one wants to talk about this, no one wants to touch it. And for kids, for Christians specifically, I think that there isn't a hero to support. So maybe in the same way that Lewis, or C.S. Lewis, that is, or did with what do you say, A Lion, Witch, in the Wardrobe, the Narnia series, or some people look at Tolkien as having taken in Lord of the Rings. So it's interesting, they say that that's a bastardization of Wagner in certain ways. Of course, everyone steals from everybody, right? That's just the way it is. But finding a truth that will maybe awaken people, I mean, what powers are left for those who believe in prayer? What forces of nature? The Greeks used to talk about this. They talked about fundamental elements, and they talked about this in the Middle Ages. The church did for years: fire, earth, air, water, and spirit. What powers do these convey? Well, are those the gifts that were given to us in the first days that the Lord has, that he put those roles in the universe? Why is it that water is neutral and seems to clear out anything? Why is it that fire is necessary to give energy for anything to move? Why is it that air it needs to go through to have any sort of, it's the energy of life? Or why is it that earth is necessary so that things have form and substance? You can go through all these things and think about it, like the Greeks did geometrically. They thought about how these core substances work. And we think the same way, except we think they're atoms that undercut everything, and they have these rules and these things. But we know that, what do they call it? Spooky action at a distance. That's what quantum physics is. It's a set of probabilities that only really happen when you start looking at things, and the world, like a holographic universe, I think it's the Michael Talbot book, begins changing the way it operates around you. And those sort of things are things that they're biblical. Um, they're observed, but they're not observed day to day, and they don't comport with our existence because our existence, like I was saying in the last one, is very constrained in a way where you are told there is a series of rules by which the world operates, and then it's up to you to see how many of them you can disprove before you die. And that's where we're at. But children who can imagine and who can carry that imagination through have a key to kind of shiv the lock open. And if you can do that, I mean, if there's one thing I've learned, and this is why they get technology out so early and they teach things the way they do, and why we lost things because we were fighting over thinking adults instead of the habits of children, which were stolen from us because the state got into educating. It went all back to Plato. But I mean, the first step in Marxist Communist Manifesto was educate the children, and they've been educated. The state robbed our money, took our kids, trained them against, their own health, and now we're supposed to thank them. It's a crazy world, and but you have to choose separation, and you can do it to some extent. You have to pay a high cost to do it. I mean, I'm paying a high cost. That's why I work so much these days, because I want back out. I like being out. And I let myself get back in because I want to help people. And that's what happens. We get ourselves in traps. And getting out of those traps is what we need to do now, because these days we're reaching the point where the belief in the people around you isn't as simple as just trying to save them. It's like you'll see happen with COVID. I saw this happen a lot, where I saw people who went to the doctors for help or who had relatives bring people to the doctors. The doctors did things and people died. Um, there was no bad intention, I believe, on any part, save for the people selling the drugs. The doctors did what they thought was right. The relatives were trying to help the people. The person was trying to get help, and they got killed because ignorance was deadly. Um, it's something you have to watch for, and you have to educate yourself and get hard copy, get books, get aware, think, learn, and pray. Always pray over everything. You know See patterns, see them in numbers, see them in the stars, see them wherever they are. And I am far less quick to say something is true or not true these days, because there's weird things that are out there, and it's like you see pieces of a code, but you don't see the completeness of it. And that is something I focus on a lot, and that I'm very curious about, and that I like to think about, and I want to keep thinking about. So, out there in the world, things are crappy. We have an election. We'll see what happens next week. I think Trump will win New Hampshire. I mean, they'd have to steal a lot of votes to get Nikki Haley to win. The sort of people who cross over are not going to cross over for her. Plus, I think it's interesting something came out with her cheating a bunch, which isn't surprising. I mean, you can tell she's definitely a system hack. Not that he's any better. I'm not here to endorse anyone. I'm here to endorse ideas. I'm here to endorse possibilities and potential. And, the other way, if you want to go the other way, dude, all you're doing is preparing for the fight. You might as well focus on tactics, because that's all you got left. And be ready to deal with a system and a state working against you. In fact, if that's your thing, you should be working in an alternate communication system. That's what you should do. It worked for the truckers in Canada a little bit. It's working a little bit in Europe. But realistically, most people aren't going to go along with it. And now you got all these other people from outside who are just going to be weaponized against whoever have assets. And, it's one of those weird things. The government will let them in, and they'll go after the people and terrorize them in the neighborhood, so the government doesn't have to go in and do it. So you beg the government to come forward. And I do think before this is all said and done, the governments will take a hard right turn. The people who are in charge now are so unlikable. They're like comic book villains like Schwab. They're going to be disposable, and something else is going to come along. And you're probably going to like it, but be careful. If you're too happy and things seem too good, that's when you got to be really, really cautious. And, there's going to be a promise for something. I don't know what it is. Probably something that will provide health in exchange for technology. It's almost got to be that. And people are going to go for it. And they're going to choose this body, instead of the new body that could be fashioned for them. And I don't want to be here, when that choice happens. But when it happens, I know which way I want to go. I'm not going to invest myself into a dying world where, it's just imagination when God has something better. And trying to find that and understand that now is a primary objective. And it should be for all of you. And if I can't preach about it, well, it's because I don't know the answers. I want to go seek, and I don't want to lead anyone into disarray. I mean, if you're really curious what I'm thinking, come to Argentina. We'll be friends and talk about it. But those are the sort of things that interest me now. So that's what I have for this morning. Nothing too exciting there, I'm sure, but something to think about, something comfy. Value you all, and try to enjoy these last months together. Probably we're going to keep broadcasting here, I think, until about summer. Probably do a big blast of shows at the end as a way of kind of, if time permits, saying some things, get off my chest, and reach out and connect with all of you. And then, we'll see. And hopefully Dana's had to deal with a lot of crap over the years, a lot of health issues, but also a lot of things things coming from the things I've done, and now I can be a better husband, maybe just a little bit, by keeping our lives a little simpler, and maybe be a better Christian too, by trying to understand the things God thought was important instead of things I thought were important, and realizing that things have to happen a certain way, and it's not quite passivity. It's just an understanding of human nature and your place within it, and figuring out a way to slide in and slide out a little bit so that you can try to not lose yourself in this madness. All right. So if you like the program, want to support it, if you want me to keep chewing these a little more often, the Venmos always help. CVCPRV. Not saying it could come more or less, but hey, it's helpful. We definitely, I'll go buy some more logs and keep it a little warmer in here. So, although I think this actually made for a pretty decent scene, except for the fact I'm declined, that I have an odd angle, so I look like I got a tiny head on a huge body, and it's not really accurate. I just got to be comfy. All right. Other than that, just pray the Lord's blessing upon each and every one of you. I hope you have a wonderful day. God bless all of you, and I will see you probably next week. We'll see what's happening. Oh, next weekend may be a little busy because I got some paperwork crap I got to do. It's just annoying. All right. So have a good one, and I'll be seeing you.